Okay, so we've got uh, quite a bit to dig into today.
Yeah,
All about Donald Trump, his path to becoming president, his time in office, and then what he's up to now with his current campaign.
that's right. A lot of material to cover.
Definitely. And our goal today is really to sort of like extract the key takeaways.
Mm.
Like what are the need to know points that people should really grasp about Trump and his place, in American politics and all that.
Exactly. We'll break down exactly how he made it to the White House,
Right.
what it actually takes to become president of the United States,
Uh-huh.
and of course the state of play with his current campaign.
Okay, so why don't we just jump right into it then? I mean, a lot of people knew Trump before he was in politics, right, from his business ventures.
Right.
But then all of a sudden in 2016, there he is president. How'd that happen?
Well, let's look back at his 2016 victory. The sources we've got here highlight that he first announced his candidacy back in 2015
Yep.
and then really fought his way through the Republican primaries to get that nomination.
Right, so he's the Republican candidate.
Exactly.
And then he faces off against Hillary Clinton in the general election
That's right.
in November of 2016. And this is where things get a little complicated, right?
Okay.
Because this is where we really start to see the Electoral College come into play.
It does, yeah. I mean, this is a really important part of the U.S. election system.
So can you just remind everybody, how the Electoral College actually works? Because it's not just who gets the most votes from the people.
Right. It's not a direct popular vote.
Yeah.
Basically, each state gets a certain number of these electoral votes based on the size of its population, and whoever wins a state generally gets all of those electoral votes.
Right, all or nothing in most states.
Exactly. And so you need to hit a certain number, a majority, to actually become president. And that magic number is 270 out of a total of 538.
Okay.
So in 2016, what happened was Hillary Clinton actually got more votes across the country.
From individual voters.
From individual voters, that's the popular vote. But Trump, he managed to get 304 electoral votes.
Right.
To Clinton's 227.
Yeah, so he won the electoral vote even though he didn't win the popular vote.
Precisely. And that's one of the really interesting and sometimes controversial things about the U.S. system.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it makes you think about, the balance between what people actually vote for and then how their states represent it.
Yeah, it's a debate that's been going on for a long time.
Right.
Since the very beginning of the U.S.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so Trump wins the electoral vote, becomes president, and he's inaugurated on January 2017.
That's right.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the requirements for even becoming president. Like, what are the rules?
Yeah, so the sources are very clear on this. It's all laid out in the Constitution.
Okay.
First off, you got to be at least 35 years old.
Okay, so there's an age limit.
Age limit, yep.
Got to be at least 35.
Then you have to be a natural-born U.S. citizen.
Okay, so born in the U.S.
Born in the U.S., that's right.
Got it.
And then you got to have lived in the United States for at least 14 years.
14 years. Okay, so those are like the constitutional hard and fast rules. But then in practice, you also have to go through the whole party system, right?
Well, it's
like getting nominated by either the Republicans or the Democrats.
yeah, usually it's one of those two big parties. And
Yeah.
then like we saw in 2016, you have to win enough states to get that majority of the Electoral College votes.
Okay, so that's how it all works. And then, of course, Trump finishes his first term. He runs again in 2020.
Right, this time against Joe Biden.
And what happened there?
Well, Biden ended up winning the election.
Okay.
He got 306 electoral votes to Trump's 232, so Trump lost his bid for re-election.
Okay, but that wasn't the end of the story, though, was it?
No, not at all. The sources show that Trump is running again in 2024.
He's back.
He's back, and it's shaping up to be another face-off with Biden.
Wow, so a rematch.
Exactly, and it makes you think, it's not that common for former presidents to run again after losing, especially not for a second non-consecutive term.
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
So what kind of challenges do you think he'll face this time around that maybe he didn't have before?
That's a great question. We've seen how he won in 2016 thanks to the Electoral College,
Yeah.
even though he didn't get the most votes overall from the people. And we've talked about all the rules for becoming president.
Right.
And now we know he's back for another try after losing in 2020.
Right.
But I think what's really fascinating is, what does all of this tell us about how presidential elections are changing? How people become president? Like, what are the paths to leadership? And are there other things, other factors that might be even more important than these basics when it comes to deciding who wins in the future?
Yeah, that's something worth thinking about.
Definitely something to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Into some pretty big policy changes under President Trump
Yeah.
as of March 20th, 2025.
Huge shifts
Huge shifts.
all over.
Yeah. And we're looking at, analyses of policy and some news reports,
Absolutely.
just to kind of give us a lay of the
Yeah,
land.
paint a picture of the changes.
And our goal really is to kind of get you up to speed
Yeah.
on what's changed without, getting too bogged down.
Without getting lost in the weeds.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, what have we seen so far?
Well, I think one of the things that's most striking is how quickly the administration has moved across a range of areas.
Yeah.
And that's really created this, this complex landscape of potential consequences.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's start with domestic policy.
Okay.
Let's look at immigration specifically.
Yeah.
It seems like, one of the big focuses is really bolstering border security.
Uh-huh.
We're seeing the reinstatement of the end of catch and release, which, that was where if people were apprehended at the border, they were sometimes released.
While waiting for their proceedings.
Yeah, while they were waiting for their proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
And alongside that, we've got the Remain in Mexico program being brought back.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Which requires asylum seekers to actually wait in Mexico.
Right.
And then also we've got large-scale deportations beginning,
Yeah.
all aimed at, really trying to strengthen border control.
Yeah, I mean, all of that really points to
And reduce illegal immigration.
a real prioritization of enforcement at the border, right? So expanding these measures, signals this much stricter approach. And I think one thing to consider is just the resources and infrastructure required for all of this.
That's huge.
To really enforce these kinds of operations at scale.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
And talk about the federal government itself.
Okay.
There's this initiative, Project 2025.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
And it aims to pretty much overhaul a federal workforce.
Big changes.
By replacing a lot of the merit-based civil service.
Interesting.
With political appointees.
Okay.
Who are loyal to the administration. And this has a pretty big impact on, key agencies.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the DOJ and the FTC.
Huge.
And then we're also seeing plans to potentially dismantle or even abolish some departments.
Which ones?
Like the Department of Education.
Wow.
And the Department of Homeland Security.
That's big.
Yeah. And that could fundamentally reshape how these really vital government functions are handled.
I mean, yeah, the magnitude of this kind of restructuring is significant.
Yeah.
And replacing those career experts with political appointees really raises questions about, the expertise, the efficiency of these agencies.
Right, and how effective they can be.
Exactly. And then, of course, potentially eliminating departments like Education and Homeland Security.
Yeah.
That would require us to really rethink
how those responsibilities are addressed moving forward.
Absolutely. Okay, so then we also are seeing some changes to Social Security.
Yeah.
And it looks like there's a potential there
What?
for limitations on benefits for millions of Americans.
So what does that look like?
Yeah. And specifically, it looks like it's targeting things like disability benefits and the criteria for eligibility.
Okay.
What kind of impact do you think that could have?
Well, I think it really raises some questions about the support systems that are in place.
Yeah.
For vulnerable populations. Changes that impact those who rely on disability benefits could have really, far-reaching consequences for individuals and families who depend on that support.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's shift gears again.
Okay.
We're going to move to international policy now.
Right.
And in terms of trade, we're seeing kind of a protectionist turn.
Interesting.
With the implementation of tariffs.
And this is generating some global concern.
I bet.
For example, Japan, they're seeing some economic recovery on their end.
Okay.
But they've actually voiced some concerns about these U.S. trade policies and how they could negatively impact global economic growth and drive inflation.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we have to remember how interconnected the global economy is.
Right.
Right? So trade actions taken by a major player like the U.S. Inevitably have these ripple effects worldwide. And I think Japan's concerns really highlight that, that these policies can extend beyond just those direct trading partners.
Right.
And actually, influence broader economic stability.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's move on to energy and environmental policy.
Okay.
We know that President Trump has actually met with U.S. oil executives to talk about boosting domestic energy production.
Interesting.
Especially given, the fluctuating oil prices and the ongoing trade issue.
Makes sense.
And at the same time, the U.S. has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement.
Wow.
and related international climate commitments.
Okay.
So this really marks, a notable shift
Yeah,
in environmental policy direction.
a big one,
Yeah.
for sure.
What do you make of all that?
Well, I think, it shows a clear focus on domestic energy independence,
Yeah.
right? Kind of coupled with a departure from those international collaborations on climate change. And I think the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement specifically,
Right.
really has some
Ramifications.
correlations, for global cooperation
Oh,
on those emission reduction goals and broader environmental goals.
yeah. Okay, and then finally, let's look at foreign relations.
Okay.
Brokering peace in these international conflicts has
yeah.
proven to be pretty challenging.
I bet.
Efforts to, achieve ceasefires, like in Ukraine, for example. This has had pretty limited success,
Yeah.
which really, highlights
Yeah.
the complexity of global diplomacy.
For sure. I mean,
Yeah.
these international conflicts are so multifaceted.
Right.
So many different interests at play
Yeah.
that it often makes, reaching a swift resolution incredibly difficult.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture for a second.
Okay.
All of these policy shifts
Yeah.
are really prompting this worldwide kind of reassessment
Reevaluation.
of international alliances and economic strategies.
Yeah.
Countries all over the globe are having to adapt to this, altered U.S. stance on trade, on climate foreign policy.
Yeah.
So it's a period,
Definitely a period of uncertainty.
of uncertainty.
Of course.
Yeah, and, a need for adaptation.
Absolutely. And I think the interconnectedness of all these shifts is really key,
Yeah.
right? It's not like these are isolated events.
Yeah.
This is a series of changes that's really prompting, this broader reevaluation of established international norms and relationships.
For sure. Okay, so just to kind of sum it all up,
Okay.
we've seen some major changes domestically
Yeah?
in immigration and the structure of the federal government itself, Social Security,
Okay.
and then internationally, we've got these major shifts in trade,
Yeah.
in energy and environmental policy, foreign relations. So all of these interconnected changes have, really broad implications
For sure.
that require, ongoing attention.
Yeah. This is something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely.
So, thinking about all of these shifts we've talked about,
Yeah.
what do you think are the most crucial long-term adaptations we might see,
Oh, wow.
either domestically or on the global stage?
It's a big question.
I know it's something to think about
Yeah.
because this is a time that demands, careful observation and a real understanding of the consequences that are unfolding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Okay. Bye.